The oxidation number of an atom or ion tells you the number of electrons which must be added or removed to become neutral. So it's 0 for an atom, of course, it's already neutral. For a +1 cation, it needs 1 electron to become neutral again, so its oxidation number is +1. It's the opposite for a -1 anion. Atoms in molecules also have oxidation numbers, even though they're not ions. The more electronegative species will have the negative oxidation number. So for example, if carbon is bonded to oxygen, it will have the negative oxidation number, while the oxygen will have the positive oxidation number. These can change depending on what else they're bonded to. So if it's carbon monoxide, the oxygen has an oxidation number of -2, and the carbon must be +2. If it's CO2, there's 2 lots of -2 from the oxygen, so carbon must have an oxidation number of +4. If you have a complex ion, the sum of the oxidation numbers add up to its charge. As oxygen is usually -2, we add on the charge of the ion to infer what the oxidation number is for the other ion. In an oxygen molecule, O2, each oxygen's oxidation number is 0, as it's no different to the other oxygen. The only other exceptions are when it's -1 in hydrogen peroxide and +2 in oxygen difluoride, as fluoride is more electronegative than oxygen. Hydrogen is always +1, apart from when it's in H2. Fluorine is always -1, as it's the most electronegative atom. Again, it's 0 when it's fluorine gas. Transition metals can produce different ions, as we know from, say, iron 2 and iron 3. This number actually tells you the oxidation number of the metal ion. Remember oil rig? Oxidation is the loss of electrons, reduction is the gain of electrons. A redox reaction is when both of these take place, but we can also think about it in terms of oxidation number. Oxidation results in the oxidation number becoming more positive. Reduction makes it more negative, or in other words, reduction reduces the oxidation number. You must be able to deduce whether a species, an element, has been oxidized or reduced during a reaction when considering the sum of oxidation numbers in its compounds. A cell or battery, which consists of cells in series, works on the principle of redox, and it consists of 2 halves that have an electric potential and then when they're joined together produce a potential difference or voltage. Each half cell has its own half reaction, so we can only measure potential difference rather than just potential of each half cell. We measure the PD relative to a reference cell. Therefore, we can define the standard electrode potential of a half cell as being equal to the potential difference of a cell when the electrode is connected to the standard hydrogen electrode under standard conditions. This is affected by temperature, concentration, and pressure. The standard hydrogen electrode consists of hydrogen at a pressure of 100 kilopascals in contact with an acidic solution with an H+ ion concentration of 1 molar with a platinum electrode and at a temperature of 298 Kelvin. As this is our reference cell, we say it has a potential of 0 volts. So if we attach another half cell to this, the PD we measure by definition gives us the potential, E circle, of that half cell. The 2 electrolytes must be connected somehow in order to complete the circuit and allow charge to flow. This is done with a salt bridge, a tube filled with saturated potassium chloride solution. If you connect 2 such half cells together, then they will produce a PD, or in this case we call it an EMF, electromotive force. It just means a PD that causes current to flow. This will be equal to, no surprises, the difference in their individual potentials. We can write half equations for what's happening in each cell, but they're always written as reduction processes. So if oxidation is happening in reality, we write it the other way around in terms of reduction instead, i.e. starting with the ion. The species with the more positive potential will oxidize the one with the lower potential. We use this potential difference to predict how likely a redox or cell reaction is to happen, and we only say that this is true if it's above plus 0.4 volts. Now you might notice that the plus and minus seem to be the other way around to what you remember in electrolysis at GCSE, but that's because we're actually making a PD here as opposed to using the PD from a cell to cause electrolysis, so they are the opposite way round. The EMF or voltage produced is equal to the potential on the right minus that on the left. This ensures it's always positive. While we know that elements in the same group exhibit similar properties due to having the same number of electrons in their outer shells, we also see patterns going across periods too. The first 2 periods aren't great for looking at such trends, so we look at period 3 instead. We know that atomic number increases along the periods, so you might think that the atoms get larger too, the diameter or radii get larger, but that's not the case. One of the problems is that we can't really say for sure what the radius of an individual atom is. We instead measure the metallic radius, half the distance between the nuclei in an ionic lattice. For non-metals, it's the covalent radius, similar idea but with the covalent bond between the two atoms. This decreases along period 3 because the increased nuclear charge pulls the electrons in more tightly. We can measure this using X-ray or electron diffraction. Electronegativity decreases down a group but increases across period 3, again due to the increased nuclear charge. As we know, ionization energy also increases down a group due to the increased electron shielding, but increases across period 3 generally. Remember, there's a decrease after a suborbital has been filled. Electrical conductivity is a weird trend, but this is due to the first 3 elements being metals and the rest non-metals, of course. Incidentally, it decreases down a group. Melting and boiling points increase then decrease along period 3. It gets larger as they have increased charge density. While it's a non-metal, silicon still has high melting and boiling points. This is due to the giant molecular structure it makes. The rest are low due to being simple covalent molecules. We learned about Group 1 at GCSE, but now it's time that we gave Group 2 some love. Honestly, the patterns here though are similar to that found in Group 1. The atomic radius increases due to increased number of shells. Their ions are smaller due to the same nuclear charge attracting 2 fewer electrons, the effect of which is less pronounced as you go down the group due to there being more electrons and more shells. The melting points decrease down the group due to weaker metallic bonding, due to larger ions and lower charge density. Reactivity increases down the group as the 2 electrons in the outer orbital are removed more easily when further from the nucleus. The ionization energy decreases. Remember that this involves first and second ionization energies. They react with oxygen to make the oxide, water to make the hydroxide, which is an alkali, and hydrogen, and of course they react with dilute acid to produce the salt and hydrogen. The created oxides are ionic solids apart from beryllium, which is somewhat covalent. After all, it is a bit of a spectrum from ionic to covalent, really. It's also the only oxide that doesn't react with water. Produced hydroxides are more basic down the group as their solubility increases. This is because the charge density decreases, so there's less attraction between their OH- ions and the positive ions themselves. Their carbonates are insoluble in water and they undergo thermal decomposition to make the oxide and CO2. This gets easier down the group. Finally, their sulfates are white crystalline solids whose solubility decreases down the group. This is because the larger cations have lower charge density and are therefore less attracted to water. The boiling points of the halogens, group 7 elements, increases down the group due to their increased size, meaning van der Waals forces are increased, so more energy is needed to separate them. Electronegativity decreases down the group due to increased electron shielding and the valent outer shell being further from the nucleus. Atomic and ionic size increase down the group, with the anions being larger due to the added electron, resulting in more repulsion between the electrons. This might sound a bit counterintuitive though. They are oxidizing agents as they will remove an electron from something else. Their oxidizing power decreases down the group, again as the electron will be attracted to the atom less as it will be further from the nucleus. Also, there's more electron shielding. The increased nuclear charge isn't enough to cancel those out. Chlorine reacts with water to produce hydrochloric acid, which will cause litmus to initially turn red, and hypochlorous acid, which will bleach and decolorize the litmus. This is why chlorine is added to drinking water, as the products kill microbes, making it safe to drink. However, it can react with some organic molecules to create carcinogens, and is slightly toxic to us ears. Halide ions act as reducing agents, which makes sense as they have an extra electron to donate. Their reducing strength increases down the group, as that electron is further from the nucleus, the bigger the radius of the ion. You might have learned how to test for halide ions for GCSE. We add dilute nitric acid to stop any other precipitates being formed, add a few drops of silver nitrate solution. This will produce a precipitate, the color of which depends on the halide ion. If you add ammonia solution and the precipitate dissolves, it was chloride ions. If it doesn't, you add concentrated ammonia solution. If it dissolves then, it's bromide ions that are present. If not, it must be iodide. Hydrogen halides are colorless gases at room temperature and pressure, apart from hydrogen fluoride. It has a much higher boiling point due to hydrogen bonding. The transition metals are found in the D block of the periodic table. We can either write all of the subshells to show how they fill up, or we can just write the noble gas on the previous period in square brackets, then the subshells from there to the metal. Note that the 4s subshell fills up first, then the 3d, even though we write them in numerical order. They form strong metallic bonds due to their small size. As such, they're harder and more dense than group 1 and group 2 metals, and they also have higher melting points. They can have variable oxidation states. They can form different ions. This is because it requires similar energies to remove 4s and 3d electrons, but they are removed from the 4s orbitals first. Ions with a full or empty 3d orbital are colorless, whereas those that have it partially filled are usually colored. Electrons absorb light and are promoted or excited to a higher energy level. As it returns to its original energy level, it re-emits light at different wavelengths, which we perceive as color. This is particularly the case with transition metals because their electrons can move between these energy levels more easily than in other metals. Metal ions in solution attract water molecules. Often each metal ion is surrounded by 6 water molecules. A ligand, any ion or molecule that can attach to a metal ion by a coordinate bond. If there are any kind of ligands around a central metal ion, we've created a complex. This results in the energies of the d orbitals changing. Some increase while others decrease. We say the d orbitals have been split. The difference between the lower and higher energy levels determines what wavelengths colors of light can be absorbed. The greater the difference, the higher energy light photons can be absorbed, which corresponds to a shorter wavelength. Whatever wavelengths are absorbed, we detect the ones that aren't, which gives the compound the indicative color. We do this accurately with colorimetry, not calorimetry. We emit white light that passes through a filter that only lets a specific wavelength of light through, and then into a cuvette of the solution with a photocell on the other side that measures the intensity of light after it's transmitted through the solution. It converts this into a value for absorbance. We change the concentration of the ligand relative to the metal ion and see at what concentration we get the maximum absorbance. This ratio is then going to be the same as the ratio of the metal to the ligand in the complex's formula. The shape of a complex ion is determined by the number of ligands around the central ion. The coordination number of a complex ion is the number of coordinate bonds formed to the central ion. If it's 6, that means you have a ligand on all 6 sides. The shape is octahedral. 4, and it's either tetrahedral or square planar. 2, and it's linear. Just remember to have the lower drawn ligands coming out of the page and vice versa. If a complex involves different ligands, isomers can arise. Same number of each type of ligand arranged differently. If there's only a pair of a certain ligand and they're next to each other, this is called a cis isomer. If they're opposite to each other, this is a trans isomer. Bidentate ligands. Octahedral complexes with such ligands can be optical isomers, that is, mirror images of each other. Catalysts are often transition metals due to the partially filled d orbitals being used to form bonds with adsorbed reactants, aided by the fact that they can exist in varying oxidation states. It's oxidized in the first step, then reduced back to its original form in the second, so it experiences no overall change. The ligands around the central ion in a complex can be substituted, leading to a change in color, coordination number, shape, or stability. In addition to these, the reactions of transition metals can result in increased acidity due to increased charge density if oxidized to 3+. In this case, they're too acidic to form carbonates. They also have amphoteric character. Their hydroxides can dissolve in both acid and alkali. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did. And don't forget to check out our revision app to help you test your knowledge. Links in description.